What specific problem does the proposed method of coupled autoregressive generation aim to solve in the evaluation of LLMs?
The proposed method of coupled autoregressive generation aims to solve the problem of efficiently estimating the competitive advantage of one large language model, LLM, over another by reducing the sample size required for reliable performance comparisons. Specifically, it addresses the issue that independent autoregressive generation can lead to higher variance in the difference of scores between LLMs, which necessitates a larger number of samples to achieve equivalent estimation errors. Coupled generation, on the other hand, leverages the positive correlation in scores between LLMs when they generate outputs under the same noise conditions, thereby lowering the variance of the score differences. This method is particularly beneficial when comparing LLMs that are sufficiently similar, such as fine-tuned or quantized versions of the same pre-trained model. Empirical results demonstrate that coupled generation can require up to 40% fewer samples than independent generation to achieve similar estimation accuracy, thus enhancing the efficiency of LLM evaluations.
How does the proposed method of coupled autoregressive generation work? Illustrate the process step by step, including the theoretical foundations and any specific algorithms used.
The proposed method of coupled autoregressive generation operates by generating outputs from two large language models, LLMs, simultaneously under shared noise conditions, which allows for a more reliable comparison of their performance. The theoretical foundation is based on the covariance of the scores produced by the LLMs. When the models are positively correlated, the variance of the difference in their scores is lower under coupled generation than under independent generation. This is formalized in the propositions presented in the paper, which demonstrate that in specific settings, such as when the correct response is a single token sequence, the variance of the score difference is minimized. The algorithm used for sampling in this context is the Gumbel max sampling mechanism, which is implemented for both coupled and independent generation. By employing this method, the paper shows that fewer samples are needed to achieve equivalent estimation errors in score differences, with empirical results indicating that coupled generation can require up to 40% fewer samples than independent generation to reach a similar level of accuracy.
Can you provide a simple yet illustrative example showcasing the inner workings of coupled autoregressive generation, particularly in a real-world scenario like true, false, or multiple-choice questions?
An illustrative example of coupled autoregressive generation can be seen in the context of true-false questions, where the correct response is one of two options. In this scenario, consider two large language models, LLMs, M and M, tasked with answering a question like, "Is the sky blue?" Each model generates a response based on the same input prompt and shared noise values, which allows them to produce outputs that are positively correlated. For instance, if both models are prompted under the same conditions, they might both output true or false for the same question, leading to a lower variance in the difference of their scores compared to independent generation, where each model would generate outputs independently. This correlation means that fewer samples are needed to reliably estimate the competitive advantage of one model over the other, as demonstrated in the theoretical analysis and empirical results from the paper, which highlight that coupled generation can reduce the sample size required by up to 40% to achieve similar estimation errors.
What are the theoretical or practical benefits of using coupled autoregressive generation over independent autoregressive generation, especially in terms of sample size and variance?
The theoretical benefits of using coupled autoregressive generation over independent autoregressive generation include a reduction in the variance of the difference in scores between LLMs, particularly when the models are positively correlated in their outputs. This is supported by the proposition that if LLMs tend to generate correct or incorrect outputs on the same prompts under the same noise values, coupled generation can achieve lower variance, leading to fewer samples needed for reliable performance comparison. Practically, our experiments demonstrated that coupled generation requires approximately 40% fewer samples than independent generation to achieve equivalent estimation errors, as evidenced by the empirical results from the MMLU dataset. Additionally, the increase in ties observed under coupled generation suggests that it may provide a more nuanced understanding of model performance, which can influence rankings derived from win rates. Overall, coupled autoregressive generation is advantageous when comparing LLMs that are sufficiently similar, as it enhances the efficiency and reliability of performance evaluations.
How was the proposed method tested and validated in the experiments, including the specifics of the datasets, experimental design, and metrics used for performance evaluation?
The proposed method was tested using two benchmark datasets, the MMLU dataset and the LMSYS Chat1M dataset. In the MMLU evaluation, three LLMs, LLAMA3, 1-8B Instruct, and LLAMA3, 2-1B, 3B Instruct, were compared using 14,042 multiple-choice questions, where each question was prompted to the LLMs, and their outputs were scored as correct or incorrect based on a binary scoring system. Each question was tested 10 times with different random seeds to ensure reliability. For the LMSYS Chat1M dataset, pairwise comparisons were made between the same LLMs and their quantized variants using 500 open-ended questions, with a strong LLM, GPT-4o, the 20th of November 2024, serving as a judge to determine the preferred output, allowing for ties. Performance was evaluated through win rates in the pairwise comparisons and the variance of score differences, demonstrating that coupled autoregressive generation required fewer samples to achieve equivalent estimation errors compared to independent generation.
What were the key results achieved by using the coupled autoregressive generation method, particularly in terms of estimation error reduction and effect on empirical win rates?
The key results achieved using the coupled autoregressive generation method include a significant reduction in the number of samples required to reliably estimate the competitive advantage of one LLM over another. Specifically, the experiments demonstrated that coupled generation needed approximately 40% fewer samples than independent generation to achieve an estimation error of about 0.034. Additionally, in terms of empirical win rates, the results indicated that the win rates of LLMs were generally lower under coupled generation compared to independent generation, with a notable increase in the number of ties observed during pairwise comparisons. For instance, the LLAMA3, 1-8B Instruct model showed a 24% increase in ties against other models, which affected the rankings derived from average win rates, highlighting the competitive advantage of LLAMA3. 1-8B Instruct under coupled generation. Overall, these findings support the theoretical analysis that coupled autoregressive generation can lead to more efficient and reliable evaluations of LLM performance.